What's Justice Roberts's game? I ask this because there's a new decision just out from the Supreme Court. Our side wins 5-4, but why 5-4? Shouldn't it be 6-3? It turns out that of late we're winning a lot of these decisions 5-4, and what that means is that Justice Roberts is, for whatever reason, and we'll look at the reason in a moment, tilting on the liberal side almost as if to sort of balance out the scales. And this latest decision is not a very important decision on its merits, but it's just important for what it shows about the court. The court is actually making an emergency ruling here. In other words, it's operating out of what's called its emergency docket. And the issue here is whether states, and we're talking mainly about democratic states, can restrict projects. These are actually water projects under the Clean Water Act, because they claim that these projects are environmentally risky and unhelpful. So, in other words, what we're dealing with here is the authority of democratic states to have their own, in a de facto, veto of federal projects by saying, yeah, we're not going to take that one because that one is going to create too many strip malls in California, or this one is going to, this hydroelectric project or this oil and gas pipeline is going to be bad for our state. So normally when there are federal laws, the states don't get to override them. And in this case, the states want to have that power. And so Republicans in those democratic states filed lawsuits, and those lawsuits were crawling their way up the courts. And so they appealed to the Supreme Court to issue an emergency ruling that basically blocks these democratic states from having this kind of override. In other words, for reinstating a Trump administration rule that basically said the states do have to conform in this respect to federal law under the Clean Water Act. So a Trump rule is now back in effect. But the issue I really want to think about here is the behavior of Roberts. Roberts kind of jumps in here, and he doesn't really comment on the merits. What he says is that the Supreme Court here should not have used its emergency power. The Supreme Court should not have put this case on the emergency docket. Why? Because the case is not an emergency. So what Roberts seems to be saying is this could have been something that could have been considered in the normal process rather than the Supreme Court taking this precipitous step. Now, there's a lot of speculation by court watchers on why Roberts is doing what he does. And I think some people think that Roberts is somehow he's kind of under the control. Maybe they've got something on him. And I don't think this is it. I think the two factors here are, number one, Roberts is very eager to preserve his own respectability. And in Washington, D.C., that means a certain kind of liberal respectability, a certain kind of prestige within the liberal quarters of Washington, D.C. That's very important to Roberts. I think the second factor is that Roberts seems to think that the way to protect the integrity and independence of the court is to balance out the scales. Now, there's no really good reason for him to do that. He's a Republican nominee. He has a judicial philosophy that I think bends to the right. But it seems like what he's doing is imposing a kind of restraint, a prudential restraint on himself in order to make these decisions come out close so the left doesn't think, oh man, we got to pack the court because we've really lost the court. We're losing 6-3. And, putting Ketanji Brown Jackson isn't really going to make a difference. She's replacing Breyer. And so there's no change in the real balance of power. So it looks like what Justice Roberts is trying to do is give the liberals a certain kind of hope, maybe somewhat illusory, but nevertheless a sense of hope that, look, these decisions are pretty close. It's 5-4. Yeah, you lost this one and you lost the last one and the one before that. But there could be decisions that go your way because this is just really a one-vote issue. If you're really persuasive, maybe with the next case, you might win that one. So I look at Roberts in a little more benign light, thinking that what he's doing, is a certain kind of jurisprudential balancing combined with a certain all-too-human desire for prestige and respectability. It doesn't make him a highly admirable character, but I think this is actually what he's trying to do to tilt the scales in these close decisions.